Hey up everyone. Well, to be honest, I expected things to be pretty quiet around KTM until February, but I was wrong again. The drama keeps unfolding and the bad news keeps coming. I even got more news just as I was finishing this, but you will have to wait until the end to see that. First, I want to say a thank you and a sorry to the great Jeremy McWilliams, who has lost his test and development role after years of loyal service. He is one of the latest victims, and that doesn't bode well for the future of the MotoGP team. I wish him all the best for all the memories he has given us over the years and the endless work he has done within the industry, which has benefited so many. He is a true giant of the racing world. In fact, on the James Whittam Facebook page, we just got the announcement that KTM are to withdraw from Moto3, Moto2 and MotoGP. And that is just a start too. On December the 9th, we got the shock announcement by KTM that it had made the decision to end its strategic support for MV Agusta. In a meeting that took place in Varese, KTM officially announced that MV Agusta was no longer considered a strategic asset and there would be no more investment. Now, this part of the story is one I first covered a while ago, and you can hear more about it in the video How KTM Scammed an Oligarch, linked above and in the description. Back then, it was MV workers who were facing a Christmas with no pay, and KTM were painted as the saviours of the company. Stefan Pier marched in, and after putting some of the initial money in he promised, he restructured the board, revalued the company to release more shares into the Pierer mobility pot, and sacked many of the long-standing dealers and distributors, moving parts, sales and distribution into PMG's grip. This didn't help with production, and very few bikes have actually been built or sold since, but there was a hope that the big multi-brand PMG dealerships could make a better launchpad for MV Agusta's future. Unfortunately, the only real news since has been a series of 700cc triples and a 1000cc F4 derived bike being built by several companies over in China. Coincidence? Remember, PMG got the engineering from MV. CF Moto are closely linked with the PMG board and have many internal deals with other Chinese manufacturers like QJ Motors, Lonsin, Zontes and more. Anyway, let's look at this more closely. Pierer promised a huge investment that he knew he didn't have the money for. Then he restructures the board but leaves a convicted banking fraudster in place, dismantles the sales and parts network that MV Agusta already had, promised more massive investment, and then walked away selling all the existing shares back to the previous owner for a $1. Suspicious? I know for sure I wouldn't want an oligarch's son and a bank fraudster on my enemies list if I was Stefan Pier. The lesson? Don't try to scam an oligarch's son. The result is that this forces MV Agusta to return to fully independent management, and all their production will return to their factory in Varese by March 2025. It creates a massive challenge when it comes to operating costs, but it is an opportunity for MV Agusta to begin again. Their statement read, "Even though they are in a stressful transition period, MV Agusta sees an opportunity to rise. The company plans to launch 3 new motorbike models starting in March 2025, with a focus on avoiding unnecessary stock build-up. If the bikes are to be available in March, remember that these will be KTM-built MV Agustas, unless they can build stock overnight. They are looking to achieve a rapid growth over the next 3 years in order to achieve stability by 2027. Despite budget cuts and voluntary redundancies for employees, MV Agusta has stated that they remain committed to maintaining the welfare of its workers, including payment of all salaries this month. With the full support of the union, MV Agusta has said they are determined to overcome these difficult times and return to the global stage as one of the legendary motorbike brands of all time. Only time will tell. Meanwhile, on the 13th of December, it was reported by Austrian publication Pierer that there was a fight in the factory. The disgruntled worker said that people were being fired purely on an I like you, I don't like you basis. In another statement he said, if you were to make public everything that has happened in the last few weeks, you would not only end up behind bars yourself, but the top 100 people would be there too. Now that's some statement from somebody on the inside. Both the factories at Matterhofen and Mundafing had bad news with the November salaries not being paid on time, but Hans Lang made a statement from the PMG board promising the payments would be made before Christmas. But you will hear later it is a complex and untried mechanism that will deliver their pay. Then, on the 18th, we got more bad news, that KTM had announced that they had appointed Citigroup to help them with the restructuring of the ownership of the company. Because restructuring is obviously going to solve all of the problems. What that means is that they are forced to find a new cash injection somehow. That means either even more debt, or the value of the existing shareholdings will be watered down. Now, as its share price has fallen from over €90 a share to a jaw-dropping price of just 59 cents a share, you can see that this won't be popular with existing shareholders. Any investors are going to want a piece of the pie, which will dilute what the current shareholders already hold. So whatever happens, you're either going to see a dilution of the current shares by issuing more shares, or you're going to see a debt, which at the moment the company simply can't sustain. Now, of course, if KTM decide to go into liquidation, then the creditors aren't going to be happy with that solution either. But if the creditors don't agree on a rescue package, then the company will go bust and they will get hardly anything. I think what KTM seem to have lost sight of, and certainly Stefan Pier seems to be ignoring, is the fact that they have a relatively small volume niche product, and you can't just buy gas and Husqvarna, make 3 versions of the same bike in different dresses, and think they are going to sell more of them. That is called market cannibalization, because the reality was always that most of the potential gas or Husqvarna customers would come from a pool of riders that would otherwise likely have bought KTMs. There has to be more product differentiation for customers, and even then, as I say, there is a limited pool of riders when it comes to hardcore off-road bikes. It actually seems to be competitors like Beta and Sherco who have benefited most since KTM bought Husqvarna and Gas. When you walk into a showroom and are faced with a KTM 690, a Husky 701 and a Gas 700, and the only difference is the colour and the name on the tank, it helps nobody. Okay, so there are a few differences, but they are minor, and sales of all 3 have been so low that at the moment KTM dealers are pushing all the bikes out at ridiculous discounts, and they can't even give the 790 and 890s away. I find it appalling how KTM have still not dealt with the Cheers Cam issue I talked about in a previous video, and although they were recorded as saying just 300 bikes were involved, we all know now that was another complete lie. All I know is that I won't be buying shares in the company anytime soon, and I hope whoever ends up investing actually understands the motorcycle industry and is not just another bunch of hedge fund managers. What I find so frustrating is that all of this could have been avoided. Anyone who says, "Oh, it's such a shame, it's not their fault," I'm sorry, but it is their fault. There was no one to blame but Pierer Mobility Group and their bad management. Stefan Pier said KTM is his life's work and he will fight for it. But let's be real, by the time he said that it was all a little too late. And if he's now saying that it's his life's work and he's going to fight for it, what has he been doing for the last 5 years? while the debts have been piling up and the bonuses and dividend payments growing. Why would anyone trust the man who led KTM into this position to get them out of it? That, I am afraid, is beyond me. Until recently, KTM was considered one of Austria's model industrial companies. KTM's outspoken owner, Stefan Pier, was one of the country's most influential top-level managers. In January this year, he even gave politicians a dressing down in a much-quoted angry speech demanding a reduction in non-wage labour costs and longer working hours. The irony of that will become apparent later, as without those non-wage labour costs, the employees wouldn't be getting paid right now. The announcement this autumn of outrageous debts, which ultimately led to insolvency, seems to come as a big surprise to the world's media, but there have been many warning signs and there's a trail of misjudgment and mistakes which could have been avoided. Thinking there would be a swift market recovery, thousands of motorcycles were produced in huge production runs. That both cost money and tied up capital. Without the hope for recovery in demand, the debts just kept rising. Then the stock that was there was devalued by the cheese camshaft issue and the company's diabolical handling of the situation. Then you can see why we ended up in such a downward spiral. Pierer's decisions are the main cause of the insolvency proceedings, no one else's. Now over 3,600 people just at the factories in Austria are worried about their jobs, and that doesn't account for all the companies and individuals tied up in the supply chain. The employees are now dependent on payments from the Insolvency Compensation Fund for their livelihood, and one Austrian manufacturer called RT Group that makes plastic parts for the bodywork for KTM said that KTM forms around half of their business and they have just not been paid. They are owed several million euros, according to the owner, who says he is already having to reduce hours for his own workers and has not yet been able to calculate the long-term effect of KTM being so overstocked and not needing any more parts for a very loose 2 months. But what happened to KTM's huge profits? What happened to their financial buffer held over from the good years? Why were there not enough reserves in the coffers, and what role do the various Pierer companies play here? Because Pierer has woven a ridiculously complex corporate web around the companies of the KTM AG group. This all gets very complex, and it stinks of deception. What I know is that Pierer and the other co-owners of KTM have taken a lot of money from KTM over recent years, and that would be very handy right now. KTM paid out dividends of almost 17 million just in the first half of the year, even though sales of motorcycles had already fallen by more than 25% at that time. In the previous year, 68 million was paid out in dividends. When profits were high, the group's reserves actually fell dramatically. This meant there was no buffer for when the bad times inevitably hit. The net assets of the company have been falling at an ever-increasing rate, from around 36% at the end of 2022 to just 22% at the end of June 2024. So where did the money go? Well, part of it went to Indian co-owners Bajaj Autos Group. But how much did Stefan Pier take from KTM? The majority of the profits went through several corporate levels to Pierer Industries AG, the main owner of KTM. And as a major shareholder in KTM, he took dividends from KTM AG, then he took dividends from the Pierer Bajaj company he had set up between KTM AG and Pierer Mobility, and then, of course, he took even more dividends as the major shareholder in the Pierer Mobility Group. From all the digging I have done, over the last 10 years, I can trace in the region of 125 million euros, which Stefan Pier alone has taken out of KTM. And that may seem minor compared to the debt pile, but it would have been just enough to keep the shareholders at bay rather than instigating insolvency proceedings earlier this year. KTM could have survived this crisis if it wasn't for the greed and bad management. So what does the KTM bankruptcy cost really? Who actually pays for the salaries and wages, and how much did KTM itself contribute in the good years? As always, the biggest losers are the workers, employees of KTM. They are the ones losing their jobs, just like Jeremy McWilliams. We established in the last video that was around 800 people at the present time, but many small companies that supplied KTM are also losing a lot of money. There will inevitably be further bankruptcies in the next few months. Banks that have granted loans and shareholders have so far believed in the cause, but they are also losing big money now. In addition, you will see from the article in the frame that KTM cannot pay wages and salaries in November and December. At KTM AG alone, the wage costs mount up to €20 million per month, and that is needed immediately just to pay staff what they are owed. Fortunately, the Insolvency Compensation Fund will cover the bill, which at least makes sure that the employees have some money for Christmas. But remember, this fund is paid for out of the non-wage related employment costs Stefan Pier was criticising so much and didn't want to pay. KTM AG has paid almost €2.6 million into that fund over the last 10 years, but now they are getting over €20 million back just for the November wages for KTM employees. There have been many figures quoted in various video publications and in the comments, and I know I will have at least 2 people telling me I'm wrong again, but from everything I can find, there are now unsecured liabilities of over €3 billion, of which over half is owed directly to banks. Now in the comments someone said that unsecured liabilities are not the same as debts, and to an extent that is true. The debt figure would actually be significantly more. These are the debts minus the value of the company's assets. And when the value of the company's assets in the form of motorcycle stock is falling every day, that figure can never be accurate. If everything does go belly up, all the stock will be worthless. Simply put, as I have said before, the money has gone. Do you know any banks that will lend you that sort of money with no security? If you do, let me know. I could do with a few million if it's going spare. Again, to clear up some of what I said in the previous video, and yes, I know 2 people are still arguing I'm wrong, but on the 29th of November, Pierer Mobility Group filed to enter the Austrian version of bankruptcy protection. This type of administration is new and has never been used previously. It amounts to a temporary freeze on everything, postponing outstanding payments, but not at this stage renegotiating them. It gives PMG a 90-day window to prepare plans for reorganisation and then submit those plans to the creditors to approve or reject. The information contained in the filing showed that although previously they had listed their debt obligations at approximately €1.4 billion, now they were reporting, as I said in the previous video, it was approximately €3 billion. We should note that although total sales in 2023 were €2.6 billion, the profit on that was just €160 million. That means it would take every penny of profit for the next 19 years just to pay off the debts. Then they announced that in 2025 and 2026, operating performance would fall by around €1 billion, and a negative annual result in the very high 3-digit million range was expected for 2024. Put simply, sales will drop by around €500 million per year, and they are going to lose around €1 billion in this year alone. As I said, KTM were unable to pay November salaries, and including December, that means that they are around €40 million behind on the wages bill alone. Then I find out that although, as I said, the workers will be paid their November wages by a government fund, that there is still an unknown system of bureaucracy to negotiate, and that could take up to 6 weeks to sort out. So they might get their November wages before the end of January if they're lucky now, it seems. In the UK, I'm told that new bike sales prices are now actually below invoice cost. This kills the dealers and the value of any second-hand bikes. Add to that a now 6-month waiting list on many parts, and that doesn't bode well for any dealers or owners. In the big motorcycle news sites, Stefan Pier hasn't received much direct criticism, but that is not the case in the Austrian press or financial communities. He has been described as irresponsible by both banks and the Austrian government, neither of whom are happy, as they have already had to step in with financial support in the form of the insolvency fund. Historically, some of his decisions look pretty terrible now. In 2020, KTM received €11 million in government subsidies for COVID, yet still Pierer paid €11.25 million in dividends to shareholders. According to another publication, Pierer received $7 million in dividends that year personally from KTM as the majority shareholder. The board continued to take dividends throughout the last 2 years, while at the same time dialing back profit forecasts because they knew what was happening. In addition, despite everything, it is also reported that Pierer has been in talks to purchase other companies outside of the motorcycling industry just this summer. Now that might not be illegal, and it isn't clear if it impacted PMG's financial situation, but it doesn't look good that he is expanding his own personal portfolio while allowing what he himself described as the jewel in the crown of the PNG empire to go to the dogs and beg for money from the government in order to pay workers. So what is going to happen, I hear you asking? Well, anyone who says they have an answer for that corker is either lying or just stupid. But the options are very limited. There has been one court case ongoing re the cheese camshaft debacle with the LC8C engine, but there is another one relating to the TPI technology too. They both need settling, and we all know how much corporate lawyers cost. At one extreme, Stefan Pier has to come up with a way of finding €3 billion to pay the deficit to creditors and another €1 billion in working capital, all before the end of February when the 90 days is up. That is when things will start to get very expensive and the debts escalate even more. Would you lend him money? What that would mean is that KTM would be able to retain all the employees and return to a full 2-shift production process and keep all 3 motorcycle brands left up and running at full production. But they would also need to sell every bike made for years. Right now, KTM needs to sell what amounts to what was reported to be around 140,000 motorcycles still stuck in their warehouses, in addition to all the stock clogging up dealers. In fact, from the administrator's report, that figure is now quoted at around 260,000 motorcycles. Pierer also needs to find a better solution than giving bicycles away to employees. Or will he just give that company away just like he's done with MV Agusta? Although initially I said questions remain regarding MotoGP and Rally Raid, especially when development riders are being sacked, those questions now appear to have been answered, and the KTM MotoGP challenge will now disappear. They do somehow need to restore the retail prices to something that was sustainable too. That will take much longer, especially with no solution to the LC8C camshaft issue in sight. At the other extreme, if PMG puts a rescue package together but the creditors don't agree to it, the company will go into liquidation. Around 3,600 employees will lose their jobs, debts won't get paid, suppliers will go under, and dealers will suffer the same fate. The reality will probably be somewhere in between, but it will blow a big hole in the Austrian economy, and the face of MotoGP will change. Will the rally team be the next head on the chopping block? Honestly, sadly, I don't see any bright solutions on the horizon, especially when every week some other piece of information comes out that Pierer would rather stay hidden. Last minute news has just come in. Adding to the complexity of the situation, it has now been revealed that there are in excess of 60 subsidiary companies. That's 60 subsidiary companies within the administrative process under the KTM banner. The figure of motorcycle stock listed is now 265,000 units held within the company, and that is a full year's supply of sales at 2022-2023 rates, which aren't likely to be hit again anytime soon. So stopping production just in January and February is hardly going to make a dent in stock levels. It has been confirmed that there is just no money to pay the December wage bill, so that is another 20 million euros needed from the Austrian government. But on a brighter note, there are 3 letters of intent to invest. 2 from what they call strategic investors, and 1 purely from a financial investor. Just 1 has been named so far, and that is, as I said originally, Bajaj Autos Group. The banks involved are now calling for the head of Stefan Pier, and his position within the organisation surely has to be untenable now, but he is still clinging on. It has also been confirmed that there will be at least another 300 layoffs in January, and the reported figures the banks want in savings to running costs within the company just don't look achievable to me. This plan will now be put to the shareholders, and there are a lot of small details that I just don't have time to go through here, but the reality is it is far from a done deal, but the likelihood is that KTM will become part of the Bajaj empire, with production in India and CF Moto in China. We can still hope that at least one of the factories will remain in Austria, but the administrator's plan does instruct on the immediate sale of some real estate, as well as the 3 subsidiary companies that run the sales of KTM, Husqvarna and GasGas. Now that one was a curveball for me. It would mean that the companies selling all 3 brands would not be the same company that manufactures them. Does that sound like a good plan to you? Sorry, this is a bit of a somber video again. Let's hope that there is some better news before the 90 days are up. And sorry if it's got a bit disjointed, but with fresh news all the time, it was difficult to fit everything in. Don't forget, I will be covering the Dakar, so we'll be madly busy over the next few weeks. Details will be on the community tab. I am just one guy, not a team of producers, so I may well get behind replying to comments. With all the research, monitoring, stage results, times and breakdowns, recording, editing and the production of the Dakar videos, there is a huge amount of work involved. I will do what I can to keep you updated, and hopefully without getting the channel taken down. Any donations for the Dakar commentary are gratefully accepted, and it will help keep the wheels turning, as they say. There are also 3 Dakar 2025 t-shirts for sale. Links are on the community page. Any donations will also be counted if I have to go subscription only access, which looks more and more likely right now. If the channel does go down, make sure you are subscribed to the backup channel and watch the website at www.barebonesMC.com. I will regroup there if the worst happens and let you know where any videos are being posted. For now, we wait. As any Dakar news comes in, I will try and let you know, but if not before, I will see you on the 3rd. Thanks for watching, and as always, I look forward to hearing your comments. I hope you've enjoyed the video and can take the time to look around the channel to watch some of the others you will find there. If you got this far and haven't already, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Subscribing helps us a lot, and it does mean you get to find out first when our regular updates, news, views and other videos go out. Please share the video with anyone you think will be interested too if you could. It all helps kick the YouTube algorithm into gear and gets the channel out there to new potential viewers. As it's that festive time of year, you can find plenty of biker related gifts on the website or the Redbubble shop linked in the description below too. We have the best biker t-shirts, phone cases, stickers, wall art, neck tubes and other merchandise shipped worldwide, so it's always worth a look and helps keep the channel truly independent. There are more exciting motorcycle adventures and other stories from the shed and beyond on the website, so why not grab yourself a cuppa and take a look around. You won't be disappointed. Take care and have a great holiday, and always remember, keep your spanners close and your keys even closer. Ride free everyone.